to follow. You want to hear the other humility joke? All right, here's the other humility. It's of course also a Jewish joke, and it takes place in the synagogue on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur. There's a moment in the service when both the rabbi and the cantor prostrate themselves on the ground, and this is done every year. And on this particular year, the rabbi and the cantor did prostrate themselves on the ground, and the rabbi said, "Oh Lord, I am nothing, I am nothing." And the cantor sings, "Oh Lord, I am nothing, I am nothing." And the lowly sexton, the janitor of the synagogue, leaps up to the podium, throws himself on the floor, on the ground, and says, "Lord, I too am nothing." And the rabbi looks at the cantor, and the cantor looks at the rabbi and says, "Huh, look who wants to be nothing." So, ladies and gentlemen, in accepting the American Liberty Award, I'd like to say a few words in defense of the embattled ideal in whose name this award has been established by the London Center for Policy Research. Yes, embattled. For we've been living for the past 5 years under a government headed by a president who, judging by his record and many things he has said, isn't all that concerned about liberty. What Barack Obama and the political community supporting him really care about, and what they assign a higher value to, is equality. Yet, writing in 1976 in commentary about this very issue in connection with the redistributionist egalitarian ideology then regnant at the UN, here's what Daniel Patrick Moynihan had to say. "And equality," he asked, "what is the record?" The record was stated most succinctly by an Israeli socialist who told William F. Buckley Jr. that those nations which had put liberty ahead of equality have ended up doing better by equality than those with the reverse priority. This is our case. We are of the Liberty Party. Now, of course, Moynihan was talking, the Liberty Party Moynihan was talking about was the United States of America. And the Equality Party was the socialist countries of what was then called the Third World. But within America today, an eerily analogous split has opened up. On the one side, we have the conservatives who, for the most part, but not entirely, are represented in the arena of electoral politics by the Republicans. And on the other side, we have the liberals who, for their part, are mostly, but also not entirely, represented in the arena of electoral politics by the Democrats. As we all know, the outlook of the Liberty Party is shaped by the conviction that society is best served when the balance of power between the individual and the government tilts toward the individual, who is thereby left free to pursue his own happiness in his own way and by his own lights. In the eyes of the Liberty Party, the American ideal of equality refers only to opportunity, and to the extent that the playing field is made as level as possible, the inevitably unequal outcomes of the pursuit of happiness in no way conflict with the requirements of social justice. By sharp contrast, the Equality Party blithely assumes that these unequal outcomes self-evidently amount to a violation of social justice. Yet to the Liberty Party, this assumption, far from being self-evident, stems from a tendentiously distorted concept of social justice. It's a concept that stigmatizes the ambition for success, as indeed Obama himself did just the other day at Ohio State. And it correlatively rules out, or at least minimizes, other factors like talent, character, initiative, daring, work, and spiritedness that in reality produce the unequal outcomes of the pursuit of happiness, to which, along with liberty, the Declaration of Independence asserts we have an inalienable right. Furthermore, the Liberty Party argues that the attitudes of the Equality Party run counter to the American grain. For study after study has shown what Tocqueville observed on this point in the 1830s remains true today. Americans, unlike Europeans, he said, do not, and I'm quoting, do not hate the higher classes of society, even if they are not favorably inclined toward them. Which is to say that most Americans are not prone to the envy of the rich that eats away at their self-appointed spokesman on the left. Nor are most Americans subject to the accompanying passion for economic egalitarianism that is made for the spread of socialism in other countries. The reason is that this leveling passion has been starved by the opportunities America has afforded millions upon millions to better their lot and the liberty they have enjoyed to take advantage of those opportunities. Tocqueville also put his finger on yet another persistent feature of American society. Poor men in America, he wrote, would often appear rich in comparison with the poor of Europe. A story I was once told by one of the first Soviet dissidents who had managed to escape to America provides an amusing illustration. It seems that the Soviet authorities used to encourage the repeated screening of The Grapes of Wrath, a movie, as some of you are old enough to remember, about the migration during the Great Depression of the 1930s of starving farmers in the Dust Bowl who were struggling in their broken-down pickups to reach California. But contrary to expectation, what Soviet audiences got from this film was not an impression of how wretched was the plight of the poor in America. Instead, they came away marveling that in America, even the peasants owned trucks. In other words, however great the gap between the rich and poor in America may be, there's a much greater gap between the poor in America and the poor everywhere else. Tocqueville further observed that in America, the poor, instead of forming the immense majority of the nation, as is always the case in aristocratic communities, are comparatively few in number, and the laws do not bind them together by the ties of irremediable and hereditary penury. As the great Thomas Sowell has demonstrated time and again, it is still the case that the poor in America are comparatively few in number. And except for the relatively small black underclass, whose plight has thus far resisted every attempt at alleviation over the past 50 years, it's also true that penury in the United States is neither irremediable nor hereditary. According to Sowell, only 3% of the Americans living in the bottom fifth of the income distribution at any given time get stuck there for more than 8 years. That's because America has, as a rule, put liberty ahead of equality, that it has become a country which enjoys not only more liberty, but also more prosperity, prosperity that is more widely shared than in any other society in all of human history. But because we now have a president that puts equality ahead of liberty, we're in grave danger of being transformed into a facsimile of the socialist societies which, by exalting equality over liberty, have ended up not only with less liberty, but also with less equality, both of opportunity and of outcomes. There's only one thing that can keep us from falling into that dark and dismal pit, and that is a reinvigoration of the overriding belief in liberty that for most of our history has shaped the American character. The London Center for Policy Research, by celebrating its birth with the establishment of a ward in the name of the now embattled ideal of liberty, is announcing its dedication to just such a reinvigoration and the new energy it will bring to the fight against the coercive redistributionism to which the Equality Party is fanatically committed. For this, Herb London and his fellow founders of the Center, which will, I have no doubt, enjoy a long and distinguished career, deserve the nation's thanks, and for making Midge and me a part of it, they have our undying gratitude.